My name is Liz and I'm part of the clergy team here at HTB. Mental health is something that's really close to my heart, and just to explain why, I'll give a bit of my own story, my own journey, my mental health. When I was about 10, I was diagnosed with depression. Unfortunately, my parents were amazing and spotted it, and they took me to get some help, and it definitely eased off for a couple of years. But then when I was 13, I was diagnosed again as being clinically depressed and also with obsessive compulsive disorder. Together, the depression and OCD completely controlled my life. I would struggle to leave the house, I struggled to go to school, I struggled to function in friendships. The OCD would make me wash my hands until they would bleed. And though I never made any plans or anything like that, I definitely had times when I thought it would just be easier if I wasn't around anymore. But fortunately, again, my parents were amazing and they took me to get some help, and I was put on medication. I saw a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and then also did cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT, which helped massively with my OCD. And so by the time I was 16, I really was much better because of this treatment and support I'd received. And I was discharged by the mental health services and went to college, went to university, and life was definitely much better. And I wasn't depressed anymore at all, but I was left with this sort of legacy of anxiety, which I still have to today. And some days the anxiety is totally fine and I don't even notice it really. But other days it's like it's all consuming and totally deafening. And I would say that anxiety probably feels different for every anxious person. But for me, the way I describe it is a bit like those sound desks, so those mixing desks with the faders. And when my mental health is feeling good, it's like the mix is right and I can hear the world properly. But when I'm struggling, particularly with my anxiety, it's like all the faders are right up and I can't distinguish anything. And it's like I just can't hear things anymore. On those days when the volume feels so loud, I do struggle to function normally, really. And I can't figure out what to do, what to engage with. And I find it difficult to be present because my brain is just racing elsewhere. I think it's really important that the church engages with the subject of mental health, because when you come into church, everything feels so joyful, people seem so happy. And I think when you're suffering with your mental health, you can feel very disconnected. And not because of a reason that you can show, but because of something that's going on inside your head, which can be really difficult to explain. And so I think that you can feel somehow when you look around and everyone seems so happy and that this is happening for them, that you can feel so alone because you're just not there. You just don't feel that way at all. And you can feel like you failed as a Christian. I know I felt like that on many occasions, thinking maybe if I prayed harder, or maybe if I read my Bible more, or maybe if I prayed more to be filled with the Spirit, God would make me better. I feel like it's something I've got wrong. But actually, I think that people who suffer with their mental health have so much to teach the church about resilience and strength, because all of us go through valleys in life. All of us, regardless of our mental health, hit bad points in our life. And in those times, it's really hard for everybody to do life. But for people who suffer with their mental health, they're operating out of the valley all the time, every day. And I think that ability to get up in the morning even and just simply go to work or simply look after your family, when you're suffering with your mental health, with this silent war in your head, it takes real grit and strength. And so I think far from people with mental health issues feeling weak or something in the church, actually there's huge strength of character and resilience and perseverance, which we're taught to be as Christians, that this is something that grows within us. And so I think that the people who suffer with mental health have a huge amount to offer and to teach the world and the church about these things. I manage my anxiety in a number of different ways. I've had counselling again quite recently. I found the Tackling Anxiety Together course really helpful, not just because of the tips and tricks that you learn, but also because you're in a room with other people who are also struggling with anxiety. And so you realise you're not alone and that there's not something wrong with you, that actually there's a community of people who are all feeling the same thing. I also know what brings me joy, going for a walk, trying to keep that fader that's God's voice up higher than the noise in my head where I possibly can, confiding in trusted friends, and just keep hanging on to hope, really, that there are good days, there's light in the darkness. And I know that from personal experience that God is with those people who suffer with mental health issues. And I'm not healed of my anxiety, and I do ask God why that is, especially on days when it's really, really bad. But when I read the Bible, when I look at like the book of Psalms, in amongst the book of Psalms, there's these lament psalms, which is the writer coming to God in all their rawness and brokenness and pain. And they're not refining that and making that pleasing to God. It's totally raw. And so that just reminds me that God doesn't need us to be feeling great to be in his presence, and that he meets with us in that. And also Jesus himself in the Garden of Gethsemane, he was despairing and broken and in this awful place of darkness. And so he knows personally what we're going through. He's not distant in that. In those moments when I'm feeling that darkness and despair, I look for the hope. And that could be like something as small as going to make myself a cup of tea. It could be something much more substantial and longer lasting that will give me hope for longer. But I really encourage anybody that is listening to this who suffers with their mental health to always look for the hope, because it will always be there in some form.